went to every backyard in Kansas City, and you're probably going to see more people that have 1 or 2 barbecue grills than an empty yard. It really is ingrained in the culture. When you think of Kansas City, everybody says barbecue first.
It's not every day that we get to talk to a barbecue master here on Manufacturing Happy Hour, but that's just what we're going to do in this episode. We're going to be exploring not only what the iconic food means to the city, but what food and beverage manufacturing means to this region as well. This week on Manufacturing Happy Hour is we're here at Marlen International. Okay, I have to ask then, what was your pivotal moment that got you into barbecue?
That's a good question. So, honestly, cooking in general, my grandma was the one that taught me how to cook.
Okay.
And it was all from scratch. You couldn't bring, pancake batter to the house. You had to mix it. You had to make that syrup. So she was very much. And when you have things that are made from scratch,
yeah.
Well, she grew up on a farm.
Yeah.
About 100 miles north of here, and so they just were used to having all the raw ingredients, and you made everything yourself. Mm-hmm. And so that once you've had something you've made from scratch, anything out of a jar or a can, it's just not the same thing.
Yeah.
So, and then barbecue itself, I like being outside.
Yeah.
So running the smoker, I grill generally 3 days a week, sometimes 4.
Wow. All right.
So, like tonight I'll be grilling.
Even in the winter?
Yes. I've been out there, 12 degrees, snow coming down. People think you're crazy, but love the barbecuing. Year round for me.
Well, we're going to talk about barbecue later, but since I believe we're rolling, I'm going to jump right into my normal first question, which is, if we were having this conversation, we're having it in the morning right now, so we got our coffee, but if it were proper happy hour time, where would we be? Name a iconic bar, restaurant, whatever it is in Kansas City where we might be hanging out.
Yeah, so downtown there's Jack Stack's. That's not the original one, which is out south, but the one downtown. It's a big building, very, very old, lots of brick, and it's where the cattle used to be brought through. Mm-hmm. And so they converted it into a really, really nice restaurant, and that's one of my favorites. It's quality food, great environment, right next to Union Station.
Well, we were just talking about the burnt ends here in Kansas City. So let's say we're there, we're drinking some Boulevard wheat, we're having burnt ends. We want to get to know your story as we dive into the food and beverage industry, what it means to Kansas City in this conversation. But let's go back in time a little bit. You were telling me before we started recording that kind of your pivotal moment that got you into manufacturing was in the welding space, correct?
Yeah. So kind of how that really started in high school, my senior year, you had the ability to go out to a VOTEC school. Yeah. And so I took a 2-year welding program. And then really coming out of that is really what generated my first job. So it was a plumbing outfit that had a big job at Midwest Grain down in Atchison, Kansas. Mm-hmm. And so took that role and did a lot of welding. Pretty quickly ended up being one of the plumbers. Had to grow a beard because I was 19 years old and nobody wanted you anywhere near their house as a kid working on things. So So that's kind of how that got started.
Well, you, after that, when you got to Kansas City, you transitioned into high-speed printing and packaging. So how did that come about?
Yeah, so honestly, getting the job was just, I applied for different maintenance jobs. It ended up being a maintenance manager job, which at 23 wasn't really qualified for, but took the role and did that part, fairly well, but definitely was lacking the skills.
Okay.
So did that. That was where I did my first plant startup on my own.
Yeah.
We put a building in Paola, Kansas.
Okay.
And I was in charge. I was one of the things. I was always the youngest at everything I did. Mm-hmm. So there's a certain amount of cockiness that you have with that.
Sure.
You're young, sure of yourself, and the first one didn't, go as you would expect.
You had some very choice words for it when we were talking in advance, right? Yeah. I think you said it wasn't ideal. I can't remember the exact phrasing of that, but what made it unideal? Give us a little behind the curtain there.
Yeah, sure. No, nowadays you would track things in like Microsoft Project, and have all of your notes and details and everything in one place. I was used to everything I've ever done. I could just memorize it. And so when you get 10 contractors coming in, and you're coordinating plumbers, electricians, honestly, I'd never laid out a plant from scratch. So workflow is a big part of what makes things efficient. You don't want to come in the building, go to the back of the building, back to the front of the building. I mean, there's wasted movement.
Yeah.
And so lacking a lot of that experience, so layouts weren't flawless, figured it out, and a lot of just the general putting all the plans together, knowing that contractors are never really done when they're supposed to be done.
Okay.
And so the overlap of people needing the same space, the same scissor lifts, same equipment, so that all of those kind of things are really what turned it into a rough first project like that. At the end, it was up and running, the plant worked well, but it wasn't easy as a first project. It was definitely a stretch goal for sure.
Well, I think the nice thing about your career is, I believe you told me you've led 3 plant startups. So this was the first one. It's where you cut your teeth. It's where you learn the tough lessons. What did you learn specifically during that first startup that helped you in the next 2 that you led after that?
Yeah, really the biggest thing was being more organized and having all your details up front, not as you're going through it, redeveloping a plan. So did a lot of mapping on how people would move throughout the plant, how product moves throughout the plant, having all that. So really the next one spent about 4 months getting that part prepped and detailed layouts, and even did mock-ups where we really tracked how people were going to have to interact with each other, how vendors would come in, how trucks would come in, and so the workflow front to back, once you have that down and you have a detailed schedule, that's what makes it go.
Yeah, the flow of people, the timing, understanding how long it's really going to take versus how long someone says it's going to take, all of that. Well, let me ask this. Do you think you could have ever really ingrained those lessons as deeply as you did had you not gone through that first one that was a bit more of a struggle?
No. You really think about it. If you have nothing but success, until you have a failure, at least a partial failure, how do you know what you need to improve on? So a lot of 60, 70-hour weeks, getting through that. But really what gives you the skill is a few failures, hopefully early in your career, and don't be afraid of them, right? You dive in and figure it out, and then whatever the circumstances are, just don't give up, right? So that's a lot of people, it's quick to, jump on the bandwagon. It's not really my fault or whatever. I like to own it all, right? The successes and the failures.
Now, my next question then is a bit of a career transition. How did you go from high-speed printing and packaging to what you're doing now in food processing and being here at Marlen?
Yeah, so first I started off in manufacturing at Great Jack in St. Joe, and that was, a year as a welder and then 4 years as maintenance. Moved to Kansas City, got in printing with 2 different printing companies in a row, which equaled 10 years of my career. And then went to a bigger company, DST, which is a very large company, and was their engineer for the equipment on site, which was also printing and packaging. They did 2% of all the first-class mail in the United States. So went from that, and then getting back into manufacturing. I like being a part of the building process. When you build equipment that's really meant for smaller level of consumption, it's just different. We're out here, we're welding, people are fabbing parts. It's much bigger, a bigger group. We have 20 engineers on staff, and so I think the transition was natural to go back to where I started.
Sure. Now, I want to dive into food and beverage manufacturing a little bit more as well, because you're a leader in this space and you work with everyone from large enterprises to smaller, regional, local mom and pop outfits as well. So let's start with maybe what's a misconception people have around food and beverage manufacturing in this day and age?
I think a lot of people picture it as a dirty job, right? They've seen the videos and stuff on TV where, it looks pretty rough. Yeah. There is a section of that is always part of all food and bev. But for the most part, when you get to the floor side, it has to be spotless, right? We can't have bacteria making it to your house for you to consume, whether it is a food or a beverage. So the cleanliness is a part people probably don't recognize. And I'd say the other one is just the sheer size of the industry.
Yeah.
A lot of people think, they don't think of one plant having 44,000 pigs go through it a day. Just the sheer volume is something that's really, and how many people it touches. You think about how it gets to your plate or how you get it ready to eat meals. You don't think about necessarily while you're doing that, the people growing, the people getting feed for the livestock, all the processors, the trucking. I mean, the industry's massive, and I think a lot of people just don't realize just how many people touch it along the way. So,
is it fair to say, at least something I've learned about the industry from you and from my years working in the manufacturing space with some food and beverage manufacturers, would you say it's also fair to say that people don't realize how artisanal it can be as well, where it's not just, mass-produced food, but there's, especially at the initial levels, a lot of research that goes into making sure you got the recipe right, things like that. I'm just riffing off what I know, but if you can pull back the curtain on that a bit more, I think that would be helpful too.
Yeah, and so, a lot of our larger producers, you think of the ones that, have 60, 80, 90 plants. They have meat scientists in the building, they have specialized chefs, and they go through a rigorous process before it actually makes it to you. I think of one that produces chicken, so they have 90 test centers in one building, and the employees are the first round of testing on recipes and different things. Then there's pilot plants or restaurants, and then there's temporary rollouts, and so it's a much bigger process than they just mix it up and here's our new batch. So the whole process, it takes sometimes years to make it to where you actually get it on a plate.
And can you share a little bit about how you've maybe coached is the right word, coached smaller, maybe non-conventional food makers and help them industrialize their process, for lack of a better word? Do you have a story that kind of illustrates that?
Yeah, there's probably actually a lot of them, but that's one thing. When you get to the large companies, they don't really need us. They have a plant layout, they know where they want to go. We talk about ergonomics and people. The smaller producers, these a lot of times are people. I'll use one example. We had a customer 7 years ago that they actually had a small building. They were processing deer.
Okay.
That's their whole focus was processing deer.
Yeah.
Somebody locally also wanted to expand that into the cows, so they had to add on. When I met them, they were chopping beef sticks by hand, thousands a day.
Yeah.
So with a knife and cutting through the product, thousands a day. So they contacted us for one of our loggers, which can batch and create the same thing as that, but obviously very automated.
Yeah.
And so when I went up there, it was a little shop. There was a building that looked a lot like a house sitting next to the plant, which the grandma and grandpa who started it all were in there. They were selling jellies and different stuff. When I went back up there just a year ago, there's 3 plants now. There's about 60 cars in the parking lot. And so the part of the coaching is in the beginning, they don't know that from the raw side to the ready to eat side, there's got to be a wall, right? Because you can't have the bacteria coming over.
Oh,
and so a lot of those details, it's foreign to them because they started off in one room, small operation. Also, we see a lot of things as we go, so we have advice and can help get them to where they're going. And most of the time, they're extremely receptive, and it builds really long-term relationships. There are still small producers that stay small. Very often they get to a certain size and a larger producer wants to incorporate them into the good products they already have.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that small producer, we started off with them when there was literally 10, 20, 50 people in a building, and then later it's incorporated into one of the companies that has thousands of employees. So.
Yeah, I really like that aspect you pointed out where, hey, you don't realize there needs to be a physical wall, a barrier between raw and the prepared side. Another thing, I think you might have mentioned this, did you help a food truck scale up as well, or is that a scenario that's happened also?
Yeah, so there has been, there's a couple like that one, but there was one specifically that they were manually cutting fajita meat and chicken meat.
Sure.
And I believe originally started off with a truck that would pull up and you'd walk up to the truck and buy your burrito or buy whatever, and they started scaling up into a point where there was no way to put enough people at a table to do that. So they get to one of our machines that can pump through 4,000 or 5,000 pounds an hour. In the beginning, they bought a machine that was way past what they needed, right? Because if you went from 5 people hand cutting to thousands of pounds an hour, it's just too much.
Yeah.
So it was running an hour a day or 30 minutes a day. And then those are the customers that very often, if they've got a good product and they got a good business sense, they grow up and then that one dicer turns into 5 or 6 in a line. So
now this will be a very 101 question for you, but probably for the audience out there, this is something that I think can give them another look into this industry. How do you ensure quality during those processes, right? Because we just talked about 2 scenarios where we're going from, let's say, an artisanal operation to something that has become automated. So how do you keep that quality going and ensure that same care continues to go into the process?
Some of it is just inherent to growing. So you'll have audits where FDA inspectors and stuff are coming in, so they're not going to have a choice. The other side of it really is, as you scale up and you're running larger amounts of things, just the sanitary practices is really what kind of drives it. You think of certain restaurants that are open 24/7. They have no choice but to clean constantly because they're never down.
Yeah.
When you're doing something and you're doing it in 3 or 4 hours of the day versus you got a 24-hour shift, you have to align with what's required for that. So temperatures, plants typically are 38 degrees, and that's to lower the quantity of bacteria that could be present. There's lots of caustics and different things that you have to clean the equipment with. And then understanding your equipment itself, and a lot of customers do swabs that understand it. One of our largest customers, one of the years that I worked with the R&D a lot, they did 195,000 swabs in 1 year.
Wow.
So a lot of those kind of things.
That is constant cleaning.
That's constant cleaning. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's been a theme in our conversation so far. You started with the cleanliness, how sanitary, as that, maybe that's a misconception people have about it, and we just went there again. Why 38 degrees specifically? Is that just where like bacteria just like, I'm out, I don't want anything to do with this at that point?
You could go, you got people in machine safety, right?
Yeah.
And so people, you get to a certain temperature, it's more difficult to operate.
Okay.
Right? Things get slipperier, harder to bend your hands. But honestly, the temperature really is based off of, if you get below that 32 degrees, unless it has salts in it, things start to freeze.
Okay.
And so things are harder to cut, they're harder to process, they're harder to manipulate. That's just generally what you see in your larger commercial plants.
Yeah.
38 to 40 degrees, but most of them are sitting closer to the 38.
It sounds like it's the sweet spot where it's comfortable for a worker, it's cool enough that, bacteria is going to have a hard time existing there. It's also not going to freeze anything at that point. Well, let's talk about where food and beverage is going as well, because as I understand it, and this probably won't be a surprise to folks when you have all these meal delivery apps that are out there, but prepared meals are on the rise right now, correct?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We've ran into numerous circumstances where people are retooling older equipment or buying new equipment to really cater to the ready-to-eat meals. And you saw an uptick of it for a lot of years, but really COVID really boosted it because people weren't going into restaurants, they weren't sitting down. But they still wanted that quality food. And a lot of people don't have the time to spend and dedicate to make something that takes several hours, right? Between taking care of kids, work schedules, soccer practice, whatever it is, you don't have time to do that. So being able to buy high quality meals that you can just reheat or heat up in the oven or microwave, I mean, that's a big thing. So it's really drastically been growing the last several years.
And another area, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this more when we're walking around the facility, but ESG has been a focus as well. And I think you're doing some pretty cool things from collecting the exhaust from some of the machines and leveraging that as well. Am I on the right track? Can you share a bit more about that?
Yeah, so specifically to that one, so we have a patent on a process that takes our grill. So what is our grill, right? It's much like what you use in the backyard. It's just supersized, right? Instead of it being 4 square feet, it's 60, 90, 100 square feet.
Yeah.
And so we roll product through it and we blow flames over it just like you would at home. We have branding wheels that are 1300 degrees that sear the marks in it, which also unleashes a lot of flavor. Traditionally, you just pump that out the roof.
Yeah.
Right, so it ends up on the roof. It smells good to anybody close by, but otherwise you're losing it.
Yeah.
So this process we have is we take the exhaust gases off of the grill and pump it into the oven so that you get more of that smoked flavor and you're not losing all that. The other nice thing is from the environmental side, which is near and dear to me, I've got 54 solar panels and 2 electric cars in the driveway, right? So I'm big on energy efficiency, but all that exhaust gas is at 300 degrees, that's just energy you're losing. Where with the oven, we can scale way back the burners that are taken to do the cooking process, not just the charring, and reuse all that energy a second time. So a lot of benefits to it both ways.
Yeah, I like these examples because that's sustainability right there. And that's very much sustainability in a non-buzzwordy standpoint. I also like that it contributes to the flavor as well. You get that smoke that gets back into it as well. And you just shared some personal stuff around, hey, you've got the electric cars, you got the solar panels. Another personal aspect that I've learned about you is you have a 14-foot smoker that has a PLC. It's got an HMI. Tell us a little bit about that. We're going to get more into your barbecue story here a little bit.
Yeah, so I've had a lot of barbecue grills. Generally, I mean, I've got 6 right now currently. But when you get to cooking bigger events, both my boys were in the Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
And being in the Boy Scouts, you have a lot of big events.
Oh yeah.
We would drag the smoker to it. But how it got started, my grills kept becoming too small to do the task we were doing.
Yeah.
You're cooking for 300 people, you need a bigger grill. Also, with the KCBS doing barbecue competitions, you can sit in a lawn chair till 2 in the morning and every hour get up and throw another log on.
Yeah.
Or I thought, you know what, I'm already doing industrial automation, so at the company I was working at the time, I took some parts that were from a rehab machine we were going to throw away, put a PLC and an HMI, put dual pellet feeders, and then it kind of got carried away, right? I'm sitting out in the backyard with a beverage and a laptop and just typing code to make it to where I could put the recipes in there so I could say smoked brisket, pizza.
Yeah.
I smoke pizzas at home.
Of course, yeah.
And so then I put overhead LED lighting on it, laser cut, home of the free because of the Brave right into the steel. And so a lot of stuff like that just made it fun for myself.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm gonna try to get a picture of this in the show notes page for everyone out there listening. That's very cool. I'm an Eagle Scout as well, so we certainly appreciated your services when having that more industrial sized grill to feed the crew from. You're taking me back to the good old days as well. You mentioned something else in there. You mentioned KCBS, the Kansas City Barbecue Society. What is that? And after that, tell us, what does barbecue culture mean to Kansas City?
Yeah, so the KCBS, it's one of the world's largest barbecue societies. For Kansas City, it's kind of a special thing. I mean, I think if you went to every backyard in Kansas City, you're probably going to see more people that have 1 or 2 barbecue grills than an empty yard.
Sure.
Right, so it's really big here. A lot of big events. Annually, like last year, there was over 500 teams that competed in a couple of the bigger competitions. And it really is ingrained in the culture. I mean, when you think of Kansas City, everybody says barbecue first because there's so many really fantastic places to eat. And there's a lot of, they took it to a different place than just the smaller competitions where there's a set of rules, there's standardized judging you're supposed to have. It still comes down to individuals, but it's not, often it's not what you would do at home, right? At home you want it to be melt in your mouth. At a competition, it's got to have a certain amount of bite.
Sure.
We're looking at smoke rings a little differently, and the way it pulls away from the bone and stuff like that. So it's done completely differently than what you call traditional backyard barbecue.
And you're a judge as well, correct?
Yes.
What does it take to become a barbecue judge? I'm curious.
So you sign up. There's a class you can take.
Okay.
During the day of the class, I think the one I really focused on was ribs and chicken. The class I went to. They show you what it needs to look like, you judge it, and then they give feedback. You do some more, they judge it and give feedback. And so you go through a process to make sure that we're not all judging it wildly differently.
Yeah.
And so it's good, it's fun, and the competitions are fun. You'll go out a lot of times at a big competition, there's 100, 150 plus judges. And so that's a good time. There's a lot of camaraderie that comes with it. Mm-hmm. And when you're doing the cooking, I've done a few of those, and that part's, there's even more camaraderie, even though you're not going to tell me and I'm not going to tell you my secret recipe.
Sure.
But you know that the guy sitting next to you or the person sitting next to you, they've been also up all night long feeding logs and trimming meat and doing all those things. So it's a pretty neat group that goes into it. And they come from everywhere.
Oh yeah. So I assume people are coming up from Texas and other parts of the country, like all over, I would assume.
Oh yeah. I've been at competitions where there have been people from England and places outside of the United States.
Oh, I love that. That would be cool. I'd be very interested to see what their flavor looks like. Because I think I lived in Texas for a while, and I think the unique thing about Texas or Kansas City is like you have that community of people that are constantly comparing notes. So everyone's barbecue is constantly just getting incrementally better every time you do it. There's just, at least that's the impression I get. You're constantly able to make a small tweak that just over time takes it to an out of this world level.
Yeah.
So we were talking about how my first stop when I got here in Kansas City last night, went to Q39, had a Boulevard wheat to pair with that, And I think your exact line was burnt ends are where it's at, right? What goes into like the perfect burnt end? Just paint the picture really quickly, and maybe describe very quickly what a burnt end is for someone that's not familiar with that.
Yeah, so the brisket selection I think is a big part of it. Finding one that doesn't have too much of the hard fat, and you can trim it properly. I like to have the flat on a burnt end, so the end that's tapered down. I like to see that an inch and a half or better. If it's too thin, then it's going to dry out, and you won't get that. But then really, a lot of it comes down to the seasonings, having the right salt contents and different things. Myself, I mix my own seasonings.
Yeah.
And when you get done and you've cubed up those burnt ends and they've smoked for, I think most people would say 12 hours is kind of a minimum. Mine, I smoke for 24 hours.
All right.
And then again, with that smoker, it's nice. I can type in the button and just go back inside and let it do its thing for the evening. And then really, after you've cubed it, you've put either a little bit of a sauce on it or a little bit more dry rub. And then a lot of times you give it one more second smoke so that interior part of the meat's also getting it.
Yeah.
So when it's done, it should pretty well, shouldn't take much chewing to get through it.
I like it. Now, I could talk about barbecue all day, but I want to ask you about some of the other aspects of the cultural flavor, we'll say, here in Kansas City. What else makes Kansas City what it is? Because I know, I shouldn't say everyone, but a lot of people default to the barbecue. What else makes this town a special place?
There is somewhat of a trend with apple and hickory, being one of the ways people smoke. But there are also other restaurants that go a completely different direction, more southern style where it's more vinegar-based sauces.
Yeah.
Here it's more sugars and it's a sweeter flavor generally.
Okay.
But there is restaurants that have more of the mesquite and the more flavors that really grab you.
Yeah. I like that I asked the question looking for like an answer around, it's the fountains, it's like this type of music scene or whatever it is, and you found a way to still answer with barbecue, which is excellent. What I think I should ask though, what are some of the other things that characterize Kansas City beyond barbecue itself?
Oh, Kansas City. I guess there's a lot of manufacturing in Kansas City.
Yep.
Not just this type. So there's a ton of competition for different people. So the amount of manufacturing here is, it's a little bit staggering when you think of just not the food processing, conveying companies, and a lot of other stuff. So there's a lot of it from that standpoint.
What makes Kansas City such a hub for food and beverage manufacturing? Or maybe what makes it the food and beverage manufacturing hub of the world?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that goes into that is a lot of farming and stuff around the Midwest and in this general area. So when you look at that, who is it that decides to get into manufacturing? It's people that, maybe they work on their car, they work on a tractor, they do different things that are very manual in sense.
Yeah.
A lot of VOTEC schools around here,
okay.
And so that feeds into this. Even my son is in a VOTEC school in high school right now.
Awesome.
So a lot of that feeds right into what turns into a person, that would build a pump or assemble, a machine, do the wiring. So I think that's probably the biggest note for me anyway.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a central location. You got that Midwest work ethic. You got the logistics kind of center of the country right here. But I like that you're talking about the tech schools as well, because I was going to ask you as we wrap this conversation, what do you see as the future of food and beverage manufacturing? We'll get to that in a second. How do you see tech schools playing into this, or maybe the new way people are looking at education?
Yeah, definitely. There was a period of time where when you ask anybody, they were always going to, early in their life, pick a job, and that's the career they're going to be on. Then it went through a phase where college was the only option for anybody. And I see a lot more people focusing and realizing there are a tremendous amount of great jobs that are good paying, but you don't get that through traditional just textbook alone. Yeah. So the VOTEC schools, which there's a lot of them around here, good ones. I've went to a few. Again, my son's going to one right now, Platte City, and they have a great program. They have Allen Bradley controllers and different things, so they can really prepare them for being able to do the work and what turns out to be really well-paying jobs.
Yeah.
And so that feeds right into all this manufacturing in Kansas City. It helps. And so us as manufacturers, I'm a steering committee for one of them, and you have to stay connected because that is your future employees. And we do tours in our building. A lot of people around town do because they want the people, the students coming out to realize, where their career could go and what they could do.
Yeah, and it's very cool to hear your personal connection with the VOTech schools. Is that vocational tech schools?
Yes.
Is that, okay, I just wanted to, for anyone out there that's learning about that for the first time, vocational tech schools. Now, let's talk, last question is, what do you see as the future of the food and beverage industry itself? Where do you see things going, and how do you see Marlen being a part of that as well?
Yeah. So the biggest thing I'm seeing as a trend over the last several years, COVID really drove a lot of it. When we have plants that, during COVID there was one plant I remember it had 681 people that had to go to the parking lot. Mm-hmm. That affected pork prices just from one plant. So what I see from plants now is a lot more automation. They're looking at how do we get rid of repetitive motion that is causing work injuries, and automation just in general, because the more you can have a process that is consistent, repeatable, the better it is for the end customer and the prices. I still see a lot of ready-to-eat meals being a big uptick that I think will continue for a long, long time. Used to be that was the thing we did, right? We went home, we spent half the evening cooking, and then it was time to wrap up the day. And now people got all these other interests. They want to make that just a thing that they do, but they want to enjoy the rest of their evenings.
Yeah.
So
what I heard around your answer around automation is that it's quality related and it's safety related.
Absolutely.
And I guess the final thing I would ask is, we've talked barbecue, we've talked food and beverage, we've talked Kansas City, we've talked about your story. Is there anything you wish I would have asked you that I haven't yet?
Wow. Not really. I think it's been a great interview, and we've covered a lot of topics, and so no, I think we covered it all.
I like it. Well, hey, we're at the end of our conversation. I feel like our virtual boulevard wheats are getting low. We need another round of burnt ends coming up. So, Doug, I just want to thank you for taking the time to jump on today's show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cheers.
Cheers.